Hi ladies, in this video we're going to go through the solutions for your quadratic skills test. So we're only looking at 5F, H and I. I'm not going to do the solutions for every question, but I will do it for the harder questions. Okay, so let's get started. So question 1, complete the solution. So here we're just using the null factor law, separating your two brackets. So x minus 1 equals 0, that makes x equals 1. X minus 3 equals 0, which makes x equal 3. All right, question 2. Complete this solution. So here we've got to find two numbers when multiplied give us negative 12 and when added give us 1. So those two numbers, you can see it's already put the negative sign in. So one is 3 and the other one is 4. So when you're solving for 0, that makes p equals 3 or negative 4. All right, question 3, complete this solution. So similar thing, we're separating our brackets, letting them equal 0. So we're going to have x equals negative 10, so the 10 comes over as a negative. For 2x minus 3, we'd bring the 3 over, and then we divide by 2, so x equals 3 over 2. All right, question 4, complete the working to solve this equation. So here, what we've got is x plus 4 squared equals 36. Now, there's many ways you could solve this. What they've done here is just taken the square root of both sides. So you've got x plus 4, and then the square root of 36 is 6. And then you bring the 4 over, so minus 4, so x equals 2. But on this side here, you need to remember that the square root of a number, you get both a positive and a negative solution. And that's because 6 times 6 gives you 36, but negative 6 times negative 6 also gives you 36. So that's why in quadratics, we often get two solutions. We get the positive and the negative. All right, and then we've got x equals negative 10. All right, question 5. So here we've got a quadratic and the quadratic formula. It's asking what would the value of a be. So remember, a is just the coefficient of your first, well, not necessarily your first term because it might not be written in order, but the coefficient of p squared. So in this case, it's 13. Question 6, which of these shows the correct substitution into the quadratic formula? So just identifying A, B, and C. So A is 5, B is negative 8, and C is 19. So I would start probably just by looking at your value of A being substituted. So I know on the denominator it should be 2 times A, so it should be 2 times 5. So it could be either A or B because C is just 2. I also know 5 is multiplied in here, and it is for both of them. So if I'm looking at the differences between these two, I know that this first term is negative b. So what they've got here is substituting in negative 8, which would have made that b a positive. So here we've got negative 8. Okay, so b is your solution there. Question 7, what is the missing number in this calculation? Okay, so you just have to put all this together. So negative 7 squared gives you 49. Okay, so we'll leave that for a sec. 4 times 3 is 12, times negative 2 is negative 24. So you've got 49 minus negative 24. So we've got 49 plus 24 gives you 73. I'm not doing any working out. Hopefully some questions where I have to do some working out. Maybe not. All right, solve 4x squared plus 32 plus 16 by first taking out a common factor. Oh, so this question was incorrect. I can't remember what I actually wrote on the board. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head for a sec. I think it was... no, I'm not going to guess what it was. Anyway, the answer to that was negative 2, negative 8. So question 8, remember I wrote a different quadratic on the board, but I can't remember what it was just right now. Okay, question 9, solve the equation x squared equals 3x plus 10. Okay, maybe I'll do this one for you. let's just go over here. So we've got, oh, come on, give me a pen. Sorry. X squared equals 3x plus 10. Okay, let's bring everything over to the left-hand side. So I'm going to keep the x squared as positive, the 3x becomes minus, and the 10 becomes a minus. Okay, so we're going to factorize this. Two numbers when multiplied give us negative 10, and when added give us negative 3. So I know what they are. It's just going to be then a straightforward factorization. So the two numbers, I know 5 times 2 will give us 10. And if we make this negative 5 the negative and the, sorry, this 5 the negative and the 2 the positive. So your solutions are going to be, right, let's just do let them equal 0. So x equals 5 and x equals negative 2. So you would notice in your solution, it's just accepted, you can't really see it there, but it's accepted 2 answers. So just depending on what order you wrote them in. So you could have written them in 5, negative 2 or negative 2, 5. All right, the next one is another factorization. So x squared equals 12x minus 35. So let's bring everything over to the right-hand side. So the 12x comes over as a negative, but the 35 comes over as a positive. And two numbers when multiplied give us 35, and when added give us 12. So 7 and 5. And because this is negative and this is positive, these two numbers are going to be negative. So x minus 7 equals 0, x minus 5 equals 0. So x equals 7 or x equals 5. And just like the previous question, you could have them in either order. So if I just hover over that or click on it, you can see you can have them in either order. Find the simultaneous solutions to these equations. Okay, so we've got two equations, y equals x plus 1 and y equals 2 over x. So this just means if we've got y and y, these two, because y and y are the same thing, the right-hand side is going to equal the same thing too. So we're going to have x plus 1 equals 2 over x. Now, if I just take this fraction away by multiplying both sides by x, and just make sure you put that in brackets, otherwise you're going to miss it. So x times x is x squared, x times 1 is x. That cancels out, so we're left with 2. And bring everything over to the left-hand side. We'll just bring that 2 over. And now we can solve. So two numbers when multiplied give you negative 2, and when added give you positive 1. So that's going to be negative 1 and 2. So we've got x minus 1 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0. So x equals 1 or x equals negative 2. Now what it's got here, which question are we doing? 11. The solutions are x equals 1 and y equals 2. So that's, all right, this solution here. So if x is equal to 1, then we just substitute it in to either equation, you'd get the same thing. So if we just put it in here, we've got 1 plus 1 is 2. But if we substitute in x equals negative 2, we're going to have negative 2 plus 1, which is negative 1. So your other solution is this one here. So it's just saying there are two possible solutions given that there's two different values of x. One is this one and the other one is this one here. Okay, so a bit of a harder question, that one. Question 12, after substituting into the quadratic formula, the solution to an equation is found to be. Select all true statements. Now, girls, I do know some of you only selected 1, so I'll give half a mark for each. So if you only did 1, I'll give you half, as long as it's right. If you chose 2 and only one of them is right, I'll also give you half a mark. So the two solutions, the two answers here come from the square root of 0. And under this square root sign is also your discriminant. So this question is kind of making you familiar with the quadratic, requires you to be familiar with the quadratic formula. So when your discriminant is 0, you're only going to have one solution. And that's because this plus minus, you're going to be plus minus adding or subtracting 0. So it's just going to say it's negative 11 over 20. So there is only one solution. And then the other one, the expression in the equation was a perfect square. So that just means that your original quadratic, sorry, I'm just trying to find the best way to explain it. Your original quadratic was a perfect square. Okay, so that means it was something like a plus b squared. All right, let's move on to question 13. Use a quadratic formula to solve k squared minus 8k plus 9. So identifying a, b, and c. So a being your coefficient of k squared, which is 1. B is your coefficient of k, which is negative 8. And c is your constant. All right, so we just got to substitute them in. No, sorry, it shouldn't be x, it should be k. All right, so we've got negative b, so plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. It's funny how I put some values in and others I just write a and c. I always do that. Okay, let's just tidy it up. So minus and a minus gives you a positive. Negative 8 squared gives you 64. Now, I didn't write it before, so minus 4 times 1 times 9. And then we've got 2 times 1. So sorry, I kind of should have substituted all these values in before. But anyway, it's all good. All right, so 4 times 9 is 36. So 64 minus 36 over 2. And 64 minus 36 is, oh gosh, what is that? 20, oh my God, 28, sorry. Okay, and then you need to use your knowledge of surds to simplify this. Okay, so we look for the highest square factor of 28, which is 4. So this comes out as 2 root, so 4 times 7 gives you 28, so 2 root 7 over 2. And now this 2 cancels out here. So 8 over 2 gives you 4. The 2's cancel, so you're left with 4 plus or minus the square root of 7. So that one a bit tricky, but you need to understand surds to be able to do a question like that. Question 14, the solutions of that. Okay, so that's not a difficult question. 16x equals 0. So we can do 4x as a common factor. So we're left with x minus 4. So 4x equals 0 or x minus 4 equals 0. So that means x equals 0 over 4, which is 0, and x equals 4. So your answer to that one is the first one. And then last question, oops. Oh, it's all right, you're not just saying anything too personal. Okay, so this last one a bit tricky. X equals 2x minus 9 over x minus 6. Okay, so let's just get rid of this as a fraction. So I'm going to multiply both sides by x minus 6. Just get into the habit, if you're going to be doing some multiplying, adding, subtracting, dividing, just hug your terms. Okay, put brackets around them just so we don't forget anything. Okay, so they're pairs, they're buddies. Okay, so they cancel out, then we're left with x minus 6. And then on the right hand side, we've got 2x minus 9. You don't have to put brackets around it now. X squared minus 6x equals 2x minus 9. X squared, I'm going to bring that 2x over, so it's minus 8x, and then that 9 comes over as a positive. Okay, so I'm just thinking here of two numbers when multiplied give me 9, and when added give me negative 8. Now the thing is, there aren't any integers or whole numbers that do it. And also, if I just look at this answer, this square root sign kind of tells me that I can't factorize it that way. I have to either complete the square or I have to use the quadratic formula. I'm a big fan of the quadratic formula, especially with small numbers like this. So let's just use the quadratic formula. And if you look up here, it's the same quadratic. That's funny. I remember someone in the class, I won't mention any names, telling me that during the test. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. What are we solving for? X, negative 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared. Now, I know we did this before, but I'm just going to do it again in case this was a question that you got wrong, but you got the other one right. I did the same thing as before too. Actually, I'm going to rub it out. I start substituting in some numbers and leave A and C there. Okay. So 4 times 1 times 9, and then times 1 here. All right, so let's just skip a step. Okay, x equals 8 plus or minus, then we've got 64 minus, what did that become? 36 over 2. So x equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 28 over 2. And we did this before, so I'm not going to do it again. If you got question 13 right, but you got this one wrong, maybe scroll back up to question 13 if you don't know what to do from here. And there's your final answer. All right, girls, well done. Bye-bye.